Candace. I am an attorney. I do commercial litigation. And then in terms of the pro bono practice that I have, writing briefs on behalf of people generally who are like incarcerated or are having trouble securing housing, might be detained, in one of the immigrant detention camps at the border. Pretty much all of those kinds of cases. And so I think the reason that I do what I do is because of my parents' experience and my grandparents' experience in this country. The fact that my parents both became police officers, they worked in the NYPD because they saw that as a way of serving their community. So I come from a background where community service is important, and it looks like different things. It doesn't necessarily look like, volunteering. Sometimes it's just in the work that you do. And so, I looked at the different career options that were available to me, and I think I'd always just been deeply interested in justice, and being part of a system to make sure that it works to guarantee what it says it guarantees. There are just a lot of ways that I think our justice system needs to change. And I see my job as the process.
My name's Elena. I go to Hunter College. I major in history and human rights, and I minor in political science. And in history, I'm majorly focused on studying early American history and like the founding moment. But specifically, I'm interested in the way that slavery has shaped our society and our rules of government. And in my human rights studies, I focused on mostly the rights of prisoners, and specifically in the US and like mass incarceration. And that also has a big history in slavery as well. There's some of people in my program that focus more internationally on like international human rights. I focus a little bit more domestically because I think it's a little bit easier to study. Actually, I love to say Miss Hacker got me really interested in American history when I took my class with her. And mostly because I really didn't understand like the way that past oppression, specifically of, Black and brown bodies in this country, shaped the way that our rules govern us. And when I took AP Gov with her, I started really to get into politics and the way that people use like our history. So I'm going to law school this fall, which I'm really excited about. I want to study primarily criminal or family law. So I really want to work, one of my career goals is to work against like private prisons and the prison system in the US. And what I really want to do is to empower people in the courtroom, because people just don't feel comfortable because of the way that they've been treated. And people are so afraid of the courts because a lot of times it screws them over, just to be frank. So I do want to be able to like create a space that even like a woman that is domestically abused can come to my office and say like, hey, I want like a divorce from my abusive husband. Can you help me? And to like take her voice like seriously, take all of her claims seriously, and give her back some power in that space.
My ethnicity,
gender, like Latinidad, and then being a woman, then being queer.
My race. Like the first thing that came to my mind was the color pink.
Most of the time I just say I'm mixed.
I'll probably say my race.
My ethnicity.
Out of those, I'd say white.
When I like think of certain people, I think of like certain vibes. I don't think of like traditional like identities. Like I think of colors and like music.
The fact that I'm Puerto Rican and Dominican and bilingual, that's probably what comes up first.
The first thing people notice is like the color of my skin, the texture of my hair. And then it's, you're a woman, and then it's, oh, you're LGBTQ. I think that's the order that society notices them in, and so that's most usually what I find myself like reacting to.
I do think of race. I think of it in certain situations too, especially being like a white woman. Like when I'm operating in certain spaces, you have to be able to like check your privilege and understand what's going on, and also understanding the intersectionality of that, and like there's other like systematic things going on to other women in the room that I don't feel. I'm a straight woman as well, so I have to, you know, do the same kind of privilege checking when it comes to that.
A big part of my identity is being Hispanic, just because I feel like that was kind of the identity that was exposed the most.
Usually it'd be like sort of like more of a descriptive thing, like artist. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so.
Definitely, yeah.
Definitely.
For sure.
Not to say discriminated against, but I have felt out of place in certain circumstances, especially like in school when I was younger in elementary school. But I definitely do know that there is discrimination happening out there, especially with COVID-19 and how Asian Americans are being impacted right now.
My friends and I, we joke about all that stuff, but I feel like I've experienced discrimination of any kind.
When I was at the airport one time, like one of the TSA agents like asked me to get out my green card so that like the line would move faster. And it wasn't even like take out your green card or your passport, it was just like take out your green card. So I was kind of like,
I felt very uncomfy today. I was at a red light and like I was wearing clothes, so like nothing new, and my window was down, but this old man like tipped his hat at me but then started flirting with me at a red light, and I was like, I don't know, I feel like just being like a woman is so scary.
Living here in Carmel, I kind of don't feel in touch with my African American side. I'd say being in Carmel, I'm viewed more as white.
I wouldn't be discriminated against because I'm white. But there's been times, especially dealing in academic spaces, that I've spoken out against like a professor, and I said, what you're saying is incorrect, and I could give you the history, like why, like basically this professor was being racist. And I called him out on it, and he said, no, that's not true, like that's not correct. And then a white guy in my class raised his hand and said, oh, she's right, she actually has this, that's correct. And then the professor said, oh, okay, now I believe you. So it's like in those spaces, it's like, okay, why do I need like a white man to be like, oh, she's correct, in order to like be validated? So my like socioeconomic background is I come from like a family with a single mother who also had some experiences with the criminal justice system. So it's interesting because I feel like that also disadvantaged me compared to some of my other like especially like white counterparts. So that I didn't have access to some of the resources that they had because of my socioeconomic background.
That's why probably with like being involved in sports, like a lot of times it'll be like something like small, but it's still like a major big. It's like if like a girl can like play a specific sport at the same intensity as guys can. As
a woman, I would say there's definitely been at least like 2 like big times that I've felt like threatened. I was in the city once and I never really like dealt with anything. And it was after a concert I'd gone to with my friend, and we were just like running back to the train because whatever, we're running late. And I just remember like this guy like coming out of nowhere, like we were running, like he just like sort of came into my view and like made like a kissing face at me, and it was like nothing big, like he didn't touch me or anything. It was just like weird. And then the other day I had gone for a walk, and this was like recent, like 2 weeks ago. I had gone for a walk because I live by a lake, and this guy passed me 5 times and he honked at me twice, and I was so creeped out.
There was a job that I had before this one, like a while ago, where, you know, I'd bring food in from home, and one of my coworkers would make really inappropriate comments about the food, telling me that my hair was not professional.
One time in CCD, I remember we were learning about like just like the apostles or whatever. And I remember asking why none of the apostles were women, and then my CCD teacher had told me that it was the same reason why women couldn't be president.
Yes, I've had a few for my ethnicity, I guess, for being Hispanic and also for being gay.
When it comes, I think, specifically discrimination with women, there's a lot on like the face value of like how you look. So there's more of like people sometimes pick on your appearance more than they do so with men. Been told in certain situations that because of the way I look, I would be a good lawyer instead of like my intellect and things like that. So things of that nature. A lot of times it's more of like the sexualization of women's bodies that is very, face value, that is apparent, and you feel that immediately, but there's other systematic things that you could think of.
But it manifests in different ways, like more subtle ways. People don't have to use an ethnic slur for it to constitute, bias or prejudice. Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
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 No, when you guys told me about it, I had to look it up because I had no clue what you're talking about.
No.
I took a women's U.S. history class this semester, and we talked a lot about that, and I've heard about it before in regards to celebrities like Lena Dunham. It's just basically keeps in mind like the same middle or upper middle class, like white feminists.
I could guess a shot in the dark and say that it's feminism, but more for white women.
Focusing on the problems of white women.
When I first heard it, I assumed that it was like white, cisgender, straight females.
Prejudice against women, I guess.
Excludes by definition the experiences of non-white people.
It's kind of like ignores the fact that certain females, if they're like not cisgender females, or like if they're transgender females, they have sort of a more difficult experience.
Taking the feminist movement and rejecting women of color, also rejecting trans women, specifically trans women of color, and keeping them out of the movement, keeping their voices shunned.
It's not just gender that sort of dictates how someone is treated in society. It's also the color of their skin that magnifies that. And the white feminist movement sort of disregards experience of people of color.
So instead of including other women that don't share the same identity, because white women have white privilege, they have taken the movement and are asking for things that will help them and get an equal standing. Mostly what I've seen has been economic rights. So those are like the women that say like, oh, we have to have equal pay, which is obviously very important, but they don't acknowledge that Black women get paid less than white women.
Feminism, I think, is too much about what people want versus what our obligations are to one another as fellow human beings. And so I think feminism gets us a lot of the way there, like 95, 97% of the way there. And it is a really important stepping stone to creating like a more just, more equitable society. But my personal feeling on feminism is that by invoking one half of a binary, like there's still erasure, like we're still erasing the people that fall on the spectrum between male and female.
Equality for all genders
Just means equality, sort of, I guess, the basics, like getting equal pay, equal treatment.
The striving for equality for both men and women.
It's the fight for equal rights for any gender, well, specifically, I guess, woman.
But basically just like striving towards not being treated differently than males, I guess, when it comes to certain things.
Equality, including people that identify as a woman in any type of way, or even the idea that all genders are equal. Like, that's feminism to me. And I think that's a big problem in some of people's feminist views. It's just economic, when that's like very important, but socially and politically and all those ways, and that encapsulates like healthcare, social standing in schools, and access to education and access to housing. So all of those, like any facet of social life. Because you could, if you take a microscope and look in there, you could find, based on people's identity, mistreatment for any type of wherever you go, whether it's at a gas station or at a classroom or at your job. Like, you could find some sort of like discrimination, even if it's not like proven. People feel it.
It's not just about like women in the United States, because like although we have like some areas where we can make up like our like what's lacking, I also think of like gay rights and like people of color, and like people in other countries too. So it's not just like about me or like just about feminism, it's also about like that and kind of like the environment also. I feel like you can't just have one cause.
It's when you're focusing on women's issues, but like for all women, not just for like white American women, but like for women in Europe or women in countries where they don't get enough education, or like in Mexico where there's like a femicide, or even women in America where, there are certain things like how Native American women are going like missing. And so I feel like there are a lot of issues that feminism covers.
Empowering not only women but like men of color, and making them like see that they should also empower their women and things like that. Empowering like people of color in general, empowering the LGBT community, but also of course like empowering women, which for like centuries, not even centuries, like for almost all of existence have kind of been put down for pretty much everything, and have always been thought of less than. So I think that that's pretty much most of the feminine movement. It's just kind of changing the norm from like white males being at the top to then evening out the playing field for everyone.
100% consider myself a feminist.
Yes.
I would believe so. Yes.
Yeah, I would.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I am, yeah.
So I actually would not call myself a feminist. I would call myself a matriarch. And so I'd consider myself like more in line with the rematriation movement, which is something that you're seeing a lot of out of Indigenous communities in the United States, Indigenous communities all over the world.
No.
I think that it definitely is more so than it was in the past, but I think there's strides that need to be taken for it to completely include all people.
We're getting there, but we aren't quite there yet.
It depends on whether the experiences that are being centered are intersectional ones, like Black lives and Indigenous lives, people with disabilities, LGBTQ people, the immigrant experience, because the experience of, an immigrant from Norway to the United States is going to be different than the experience of an immigrant from the Caribbean or from Central America or from Asia or from Africa.
For now, it depends on which spaces you are. I think the people in the corridors of power in DC, most of them are white feminists, except a couple of exceptions like AOC and her squad. So I think they're starting to try to challenge white feminism in those spaces. I think a lot of grassroots organizing are really checking intersectionality and making sure those voices are heard. But I think some of the big people that you see, like women that have big positions of power, like Nancy Pelosi and stuff like that, they are fighting the fight for other white women. They're not including other people's voices.
I'm not saying these aren't valid causes, but I feel like something that's not stressed as much is like education for young girls in other countries, because we have a lot of opportunities we meaning like people like us kind of have opportunities to go to college and it's expected of us, but then there are girls in some countries where their education is stopped after 6th grade.
there are like kind of like two groups where there are women who are really like focused on intersectional feminism, where they will like bring to light a lot of issues regarding like women of color or even like trans women. But then I feel like at the same time there's like kind of this other group that kind of overshadows the intersectional feminism, where like they just focus on like these issues that they are in a way a problem, but they're not as pressing as a problem as like women dying.
Truthfully now, I feel like feminism is necessary because not all things are equal, like equal pay hasn't been reached. I feel like modern feminism is getting to a point where women are trying to push themselves over men, when I feel like it should be more of a search for equality.
At least when I think of it as all people, but I don't really notice it either way. I guess I do see more of typically white females like speaking out about it, I guess, but that also just might be because they are typically what's expected, I think, when like you picture a feminist.
People like to think that it is, and like most people who are feminists do lean more towards general, like I would want to say like being more liberal minded, like, you know, supporting LGBT, supporting, you know, people of color. Some people just view feminism as like, okay, women need better pay, women, you know, and then that's pretty much it. They don't really take into account like African American women. A lot of feminists don't take into account like transgender women. They don't take into account like people like that that aren't like that outside of the norm. So like I want to say it's like mostly inclusive, but I don't think it's as inclusive as it should be.
Taking a critical eye of an issue with the way that race, gender, and class work to create that issue. So not just looking at it from one perspective, but all three.
It's remembering that there's a bunch of people who aren't in the same circumstances, or like they don't have the same privileges as you, so you have to remember to include things that may not be relevant to you, like certain causes or obstacles, but that they are relevant to other people and that severely impacts their experience.
You focus on all types of women, and you know, regardless of race or nationality, or whether or not like they're trans women or like sexuality.
Like exploring many other realms that are important, because I know like usually like with progression in society, usually it's by gender. Like first, like there'll be like a stride that's made for all men, and then it'll be for all white females, and then eventually it'll be for females of color. So kind of the focus on making sure other groups are still able to accomplish the equality that they can, while also focusing on the movement for women, because it's not black and white. But it's kind of unfortunate, like in some sections of intersectionality, because like it's always like women have to wait last for change, when change should happen all at the same time. But
all races, color, ethnicities, that stuff.
Since you're comparing it to white feminism, I'm guessing that it's everything else.
I actually don't really know. I saw it when you posted the survey, but I don't really know what it means. I'm guessing it's something with like different kinds of people.
It's including everything in terms of like people with disabilities, all genders, binary, non-binary, all that.
Our ultimate goal is equality for all people, which I'm hoping that it is. You know, we have to acknowledge the ways that those different identities interplay and intersect with one another. I was class of 2004, so this is a while ago, and I personally know that things have changed because I've had friends that have taught in the Carmel Central School District, and they've remarked and shared with me how much things have changed. But my experience when I was at CHS was that, you know, it really was not an inclusive place, at least not by design. Students definitely worked very hard to make it inclusive. Some friends of mine and I started the Human Rights Club because we felt that the environment at the school was not inclusive. It was not LGBTQ friendly. Teachers and administrators were discriminating against gay and lesbian couples. Like, they wouldn't let them hold hands, and they wouldn't let them show affection, even though they would let straight couples do that. There were definitely a lot of underhanded things that teachers would say to students of color that were really out of line and really inappropriate. There were ways that students were really cruel to people from kind of non-traditional identities. It's interesting, I actually had a conversation with some friends on Facebook the other day about this. What inspired it was this set of tweets about educational abuse. What did a teacher do that was negative that stuck with you for a long time? And while everybody had expressed having negative experiences, the most hurtful ones that were examples of overt and covert racism, overt misogyny, the treatment of people with disabilities, of LGBTQ people. And so it was very much happening when we were in school. It sounds like a lot of that has changed for the better, but it was very, very real.
I think there was. I think after I left Carmel, when I went to the city, I really started to understand what that meant. I'm not sure if that is a reflection of the school at whole or from my family, that primarily doesn't really even take the time to understand these issues. But I do feel at CHS there's a large population of, at least when I went there, of people that really put out there some, say, conservative views that were pretty offensive, and there wasn't a lot of confrontation for that. So I remember in Mrs. Hacker's AP Gov class, we were divided into Democrats and Republicans. And from what I remember, the people that were Democrats were very center. I didn't really see a lot of radical thought in CHS. And from my memory, maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but Ms. Hackert was really the person that allowed me to explore some of the more anti-establishment ideas that are being put out into the world. So I do, and I think it's not just at CHS, I think it's a really big problem in the way that we teach history in this country, that we do not include voices of Black and brown people. We do not teach about even queer movements, or really it's very, very idealized. So I do think there is definitely room for improvement. And I think a really easy way to do that too is to reform the way that we teach history.
Yeah, I would say overall everywhere. I think it got worse as high school went on, because we were made aware to more topics and conversations. But I'll never forget one day when my sister came home from school, and people who are now seniors graduating this year were saying in her child psych class that was multi-grade levels that there's only 2 genders, and just saying really homophobic and transphobic. And one of the worst problems I think in our school was Islamophobia and xenophobia in general, because it's just so white and not even skin color, but just everything is one-dimensional, and there's not a variety of people, and there's not a lot of diversity, and these people only think their way is the only correct way of being. All percentage thinks of the school recognize that, and now it's my grade that has been out of high school for a year notices it a lot, because we went to college and we see there are ways of being that would just not be tolerated or accepted at Carmel High School.
honestly, I feel that a lot of the feminists in our school, they are very vocal about like rights around like across the board, where they'll advocate for women of all color and of all backgrounds. But I feel like there are some people that they don't really like understand that there are more issues, and it's really because like they aren't really exposed to that.
Definitely, I had my expectations coming into like mostly white suburban school when I first got here, because obviously I wasn't here my whole life. I moved here my junior year. My expectations for it were so much worse than what I thought it would be. So that's definitely a plus. Like, I didn't expect to see like little rainbow flags all over the school. I didn't expect to see like a whole bunch of things like that. But at the same time, I think that the staff and the students are two very different things. So the staff, yes, they're like a bit more progressive. They're a bit more like, I don't want to say liberal, but like they're a bit more like, open-minded to things and things like that. But I feel like students, a lot of time, like I have heard a lot of words that shouldn't be said come out of students' mouths who shouldn't be saying them and stuff like that. So I've heard no kind of like talk about any kind of like gay history throughout my whole time in the school. Like not even like a little tidbit here and there when it becomes relevant. I haven't heard much about like what's going on with trans women. Even in my AP Human Geography class, where you would expect for us to talk about things like that, like we don't talk about it.
I think school, it's like the first exploration in between like division that we face, and like a lot of people, like they're afraid to stick up for people who are transgender, like even if like they're a girl or there's someone that is oppressed, they kind of look down on someone who is oppressed more so than them in a way that's completely against the intersection.
I don't think it's talked about in school that much because it is a touchy topic, especially in our school where it's like 70% white. I think it's probably completely ignored.
Probably. I feel like feminism doesn't get talked about a lot in general in school, but I definitely think I don't think I've ever really heard people like bring up like different statistics like when it comes to feminism. I don't remember if we even learned about like old feminism, but I don't think we were ever really brought to the idea of intersectionality.
Whenever people think of feminism, they just think about women, these crazy women fighting for rights, and usually in like pictures and stuff, it usually depicts white women. It doesn't really include people of all races, all backgrounds, and people with disabilities.
Run the world. Run the world. Girls, girls.